Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast, is supported by a generous grant from the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust. If you would like to contribute to our on-the-ground conservation initiatives and our conservation internship and mentorship programs here in North Dakota, please consider making a donation to us through our member support link on our Spotify page. Your contributions will directly support the Walsh County Three Rivers Soil Conservation District, where this year we will plant over 10,000 trees and several hundred acres of conservation grass, pollinators, and cover crops, while also offering hands-on conservation job training to our high school and college interns. You can also support our efforts by liking, reviewing, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thank you. Welcome to Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. This is your host, Josh Anderson. To be a rancher is not for the faint of heart. My work with ranchers throughout the Great Plains and the American West reminds me of the origins of the word care, which comes from the Old English word for sorrow, grief, and trouble. To care for cattle, pigs, chickens, and other livestock often comes with stories of sorrow, grief, and trouble. I've watched ranchers discover a cow killed by lightning in the pasture, its head crowned by big blue stem burnt to a halo of ash. Listened to a rancher describe cows frozen in a North Dakota blizzard, his frostbitten hands scooping calves out of drifts crusted with snow. I've seen cattle killed by algae blooms in the waterhole, listened to stories about wolves, drownings, disease, mysterious deaths without a known cause. The tough reality is that sometimes livestock die before making it to market. Today's episode, called Shit Talk and Deadstock, the 4 Steps to Livestock Composting, we dedicate our conversation to what to do about deadstock and defecation on a ranch operation. We talk with Mary Keena of NDSU Extension Research Center in Carrington, North Dakota, where she teaches us about her unusually dirty job in soil health research, manure and mortality composting. On her website, Mary writes, "If it stinks or it's dead, I'm probably your person." Listen to the episode to learn how Mary became the go-to person in North Dakota for all things related to death and defecation on a ranching operation. Listen to learn the simple 4-step guide to composting a dead animal and to better understand the benefits of deadstock composting, as well as the benefits of livestock manure to improve water retention, increase organic matter, and bolster overall soil health on cropland and ranch land. There may be no clear path to process the grief when a beloved cow dies before its time, but today's episode offers a lively conversation about how the sorrow of a dead cow can be converted into food for the underground herd of soil microbes. Without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome to Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. We are delighted to have Mary Keena of NDSU Extension from Carrington, the Carrington office. And I'm really excited to talk to you today because of your unusual background, I guess, and what you do. And you work in manure management, right?
Yes.
And so I guess I don't want to call this a shit talk, but that's kind of what we're going to be talking about
all
today.
All the manure jokes.
Right,
yep,
yeah.
Yep.
So how do people usually react when they discover that you specialize in manure management and mortality composting?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So thank you first so much for having me. This is fun. It's always fun to talk about Why do we have a manure specialist? And how did I end up here? And so my title is Livestock Environmental Management. And when I say that to just the common person walking down the street, like, what does that even mean? And so I get to tell them, manure and dead animals. And then they're like, wait, what? And so that's the typical reaction is, you specialize in manure and mortality. Like, what does that even look like? And some people will ask me if my husband thinks I smell at the end of the day. But that's it. Like, wait. And so how do you work with producers, or what does that even entail? Which leads to a really cool conversation then of why we talk about manure and mortality management and what that leads to for our producers and what our producers have to deal with if they're going to raise livestock. It's an inevitable part of having animals. And so how do we deal with that? So the first reaction is, and then after that, it's a cool conversation.
Yeah, it goes from revulsion to respect, it sounds like, after a while. Yep. Oh, man, yeah. I mean, to me, that's such an interesting topic. And I'm curious, though, like, what happened to you? How ddid you get into manure management and mortality composting?
Does somebody go to school for this?
Yeah.
No. No, I did not. I've always been interested in working for Extension. Wherever I ended up, I knew that was going to be my career. I had really awesome role models growing up in the Extension world, and so there was no question that I would end up wherever I was in Extension. I like to help people. I like the concept of we help everybody, and so that is why I wanted to work in Extension. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how many animals you raise. If you know what you're talking about or not, we're going to help you. And so to me, that's a really interesting part. And then, of course, the youth work that we do, too. I was a youth, and my extension agent drew me in with, here's why you're important. Here's why what you want to do is important. And so the extension part was always going to be a thing. The manure part, not so much. And so I applied for a handful of jobs when I was done with grad school. And I actually came to the Carrington Research Extension Center and interviewed for another position, more in ruminant nutrition. So that's my background, ruminant nutrition and fetal programming. So what the animal eats and how that affects the baby. And so I interviewed for that position, and it was not a right fit for me. I wasn't feeling it at the end of the day. But what I did know is they had another position available that was extension, working with producers, and yeah, it was manure, but meh. And so I went back and I talked to my PI about it, my professor at the time, and she said, look, nitrogen's nitrogen, whatever you're doing, whether you're feeding it in the ruminant nutrition aspect or whether you're dealing with it on the back end. It doesn't matter. She's like, you know the stuff, try it out. And so I applied. The group that had interviewed me was so cool. And I'm like, if I get to work with these people, this is going to be great. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah. I love how your website declares that if it stinks or it's dead, I'm probably your person, which, I don't know if I'm going to use that on a dating app, but that's a really good description. But with such a description, I imagine you don't have such a thing as a typical day of work. But could you describe for us what a day in the life looks like for you? And how much of your time is spent directly working with dead or smelly things? And what other things do you do with your time in here?
There is absolutely no typical day. And I like to think that there's seasons in extension. So like right now, as we're recording, we would say it's our winter meeting season. And as the spring comes, we say it's kind of more the spring mortality management season, as we're heavy into calving with producers and lambing and helping them manage their mortalities. In the summer, my stuff backs off a little bit as far as a hands-on perspective, and I get to do a lot of publication updates. A lot of office work where I'm catching up on a lot of things because producers are either in the field or making hay. And their cattle and their livestock are out to pasture, and so there's not a lot happening there. Manure management is a spring thing and kind of a fall thing. But then that gives me time to work on other things, and then here comes fall, and we start our education again and working with extension agents. And so there is no, like you said, typical day. Now, in the winter, it's a lot of meetings. So what does that mean? Not just sit around and have a meeting time. It's producers come to meetings and want to learn about different topics. What is the research you guys did this year? What are the demonstrations? What results did you guys find? And so that's a really great time for us to get out and see a group of producers all at once and talk about what's on their mind. That also gives us ideas then to follow up in the summer with our demonstration projects here at the center. So I can come back and say, okay, there were questions on these 2 management styles for manure composting. We're gonna put those out this summer, and we're gonna have a demonstration day on that. Or people are wondering about stacking mortalities in a compost pile. What does that look like? Okay, we need to have a demonstration on that. And so I bring the information back from the winter, and then we can go and set stuff up in the summer for demonstrations to have people come in for field days or just compost and manure day. Other days, you'll find me doing webinars for our horse folks. So any kind of horse owners that we have. And so a day like that would be the day before. I am sending reminder emails. I'm making sure that our speakers are in line and ready to go. I'm making sure to answer any registration questions we have. And then the day of the webinar, we're working on, again, making sure our technology works. So I switched from in-person horse meetings to webinars in 2020. We were made to switch.
Sure, yeah.
And it's been great. It's been so good for us. And so we switch, we do the horse webinars in the spring, and so then we do webinars during the day, and we answer questions, and we follow up with editing of those webinars to put on the website. And so that would be a webinar day. A day like today, I'm working on, we have feedlot school next week, and so answering registrant questions, getting the name tags ready, running around and making sure our presentations are ready. I updated computers this morning. And so that's the day that's inside. And then our days outside, when we're turning compost, watering compost, that's kind of more of our summer stuff. Creating images for our publications. So everything that you would see in a publication that I give, or a picture that when I give a presentation, we do that here. And it's not staged, we actually do the thing. And so if you see a dead pile in my presentation, it's because we had a dead pile here. If you see a compost row, it's because we're out composting. My team that works at the livestock unit, they're not going to just set something up for fun. There has to be a reason behind it.
Sure.
And I appreciate that, because this is a real life scenario. We're a working center. We have a feedlot and a cow herd and a seed stocks program and lots of field trials. And so we have to be as real as we can, as if a producer is doing it.
That sounds like you wear many hats, do a lot of different things.
It's never boring.
Yeah, I mean, that's exciting, right? I also love that you acknowledge the seasonality of the job, and the way that it's similar for me with the Walsh County Soil Conservation District, where, winter we're planning and preparing our outreach events, and we're writing grants, and we're working on this podcast and our wildlife documentary, and we're bringing in students from the area schools for job shadowing and doing outreach and things like that. And so there's a lot going on in the winter, even though today when I was driving in here, it was -3 on my pickup, and there were sun dogs, those beautiful shimmers on the side of the sun. So it's clearly, it's North Dakota, it's cold, but we're still working, we're still getting things done in the winter.
And I would say that we appreciate the seasonality of that too, in extension and in our research that we do here too. And probably everybody does. I read something just a couple weeks ago that said, in the winter, the earth slows down, and so we should too, right? We should follow that. And I think we do. It feels busy and crazy when we're on the road for this meeting, on the road for that meeting, but it's a really good time for us too to connect with producers. I was able to have a great conversation with a producer last week at one of the meetings I was at, and I've been saying, I need to stop and see that guy. I need to stop and see that guy. That guy came to the meeting because he said, we need to talk. And it was great. We had a great discussion. Him and I have been going back and forth on email, pictures, and texting for 2 years now about how do we get this compost row up and running? How do I do it right? And he's like, I just wanted to stop and just say hi, slow down a minute while we're not doing it. Yeah. And that was so cool.
Yeah.
It's really great to have those conversations. And so I don't want to say my favorite part, but maybe one of my favorite parts of this job is getting to go out and actually help producers and see the results of what's happening in the background, creating the meetings and doing the presentations and making sure this stuff works, and do we have the right coffee, and do we have enough water, and making sure everything's right. But then we also get to go and slow down a minute and actually see the results of our work.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
So while it's -3 and it's, I would say maybe a little miserable out, it's still a really cool time of the year for us.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, speaking now in early January here, it is, what you're describing is, to me, one of the often overlooked but really important parts of working in conservation or agriculture. Relationship building, that effort to build trusting relationships across a range of different kinds of folks working with land and livestock and crops and prairie restoration, like all those different kind of elements that are coming together in the kind of work that we're doing here. So that's huge. So I have to ask you, what is mortality composting, and what are some of the steps involved in this form of resource management?
So it's really basic. A lot of folks will come and say, we need a recipe for this, and they want something big. And we've broke it down in extension myself, and I have a handful of agents that have helped me with this. We started with 5 steps, and we thought maybe that was even too many. And so when we edited our publication last year, we cut a step off. 4 steps, 4 simple steps to composting a dead livestock. And do any of us want to talk about those things? No, not really. Whether that's one normal mortality, or if we have 60,000 poultry that we have to compost because of avian influenza, nobody wants to talk about the dead animal. It's a little bit different than talking about a soybean plant that died. Still livelihood, absolutely no question. But it feels different when you see the life go out of something that you have raised.
Yeah.
And so we approach that in a really decent manner, as in, was this a normal mortality or something else going on? Do we have to investigate this farther? Past that, okay, now let's do something with this. Carcass abandonment is illegal. We can't just leave carcasses laying around anywhere. And so dragging them to the rock pile is not an approved method of disposal, or the section line. And so we compost them. And there are many approved methods of dealing with mortality, but we really like composting. We do it here at the center, and we've done other methods in the past. But the whole time I've been here, we've composted because you lay down a carbon source, so 2 foot of carbon source. You put the carcass on top. You cover it with some bulking material, and so that would be like a spent silage, moldy distillers, a little bit of manure, 6 to 8 inches, and then we come on with our top cover. And so again, that's going to be a carbon source. Typically here it's straw. We put about 2 feet of that on top, and that's our mortality pile. And that's it. We just let it cook. It composts. And so the main questions I get is, do the bones go away? Most of the small ones, and especially if it's a baby animal, something, if it died during calving or lambing or foaling, again, it's not a fun, cushy topic to talk about, but it happens. It's part of the system. And so because their bones are more cartilage, they're not as calcified, they will go away almost always. Something that's older, we're still going to see femurs. So that's like the big leg bones, shoulder blades, like a scapula, and then jaws. We have a lot of jaw bones left. And so what we either do with those is leave them in the compost mortality pile. We'll just open that pile up and put our next dead critter in there and close it. Sometimes that's 6 months before you get another dead. Sometimes during calving, lambing, foaling season, maybe that happens in 2 weeks. Either way, we open it up, we put the next one in. And so it's something too that we don't have I don't want people to think, well, they have mortality spread all over the countryside. We don't, because most of our producers don't have a lot of mortality. The time when we're going to see a big mortality is going to be during a disease outbreak or a weather-related issue. Flood, blizzard, tornado, for us up here in North Dakota, and then a disease issue. Otherwise, we have the mortality. And so do the bones all go away? No, not necessarily. We can put them in and just continue to compost them until they're brittle, or we can scoop them out and put them in the pit or put them in our dumpster once they're white.
Yeah.
White clean.
So are you doing these mortality piles on site, in a pasture, in cropland, so that it rebuilds the soil health right there? Or are they happening in a specific location where you're going back and kind of taking that composted material and then maybe spreading it onto land that's going to be in production in some way?
So when we're mortality composting, we almost always have a mortality site. And so we bring the mortality to a specific area and compost it there. And whether this is manure management or mortality management, we always want to keep site selection in mind. So we're looking for some kind of clay base that we're putting these compost piles on, or manure pile, whatever that is. And then we're looking to make sure we're not in a floodplain. We don't want the area to become inundated with water while we're managing this. And so we're almost always bringing it to a site, unless it happens like in the summer, if we have a harmful algal bloom affect some of our animals, then we're gonna probably just do it near, in that pasture near where they passed away. Otherwise, we'll bring them to the site and then we'll compost them there. And like I said, so as far as like reusing it or, do we go and spread it? We can, and we have spread mortality compost here at the center, but there's often not a lot. There's not a lot of it. And so I've been here for 11 years, and one time in 11 years we've spread our mortality area. So that's how much we just reuse. We just keep recycling that one pile over and over, or that one row. So we'll have a compost, or we'll have a dead pile here, we'll have another mortality pile here, one down the row, but we put them kind of in a row so they look nice. They're easier to manage that way. But then when we get to the end, if we have something die, we'll just bring it back and put it back in the pile. We just open it up and put it in, put the fresh carcass in and close it and let it be. And so we don't have a lot of product at the end of that we have to spread. Can we spread it? Yes. The nutrient characteristics come out pretty similar to what our manure in North Dakota is, as far as NP and K go. So yeah, that's how we manage it.
So NP and K stands for?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
No,
nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Okay.
And so those are kind of the big three nutrients that we're looking for in manure, in mortality management, and fertilizer. So that's usually what we equate things to when we're saying, like, does it have any fertilizer value?
Yeah. And are people, they must be bringing their dead livestock to the center here, or you guys have your own, or how is it? Yeah.
Nope, we have our own row from our own livestock.
Okay.
Yep, and so we have a cow herd here. We have a confined cow herd at the center, and then we also have feedlot projects that we do. And so we have, if we have mortalities, it's from our own livestock.
Okay, and so your role then is performing that, learning from that, researching it, and then being able to do the outreach so that you can help other producers to learn from what you're learning.
And so everything that we do here, whatever part of the program we're doing, whether that's the soil health part or the any kind of agronomy research we're doing, our seed stock stuff, or the livestock, it's all always available for a producer to come and ask questions. And so we always have some kind of demonstration area going on, and so they can go down to the compost area. We'll open the dead pile for them. They can see this is what 3 months of composting looks like. This is what 6 months looks like. This is what 2 turns on our manure compost looks like. This is what 4 turns is. This is a completed row at the end. And so everything that we do here is always set up to be a demonstration as well. But then, so I've learned from that, and we get to make our mistakes here. But then I also go out to producers' places and do producer visits. And so, hey, I had a mortality. I'm ready to try that composting thing. What do you think? And so we'll go out and do it. And so I'd said earlier that people want a recipe all the time. And so I'll say, okay, let's start with a carbon base. Let's put the carcass on, bulking material, and cover it. And they're like, what else? I'm like, that's it. Well, there's got to be more. And I'm like, no, there's not, right? Let's just try that. Well, we must need some special material. And then what I like about mortality composting, one, we can use it in the winter when the ground is frozen. So that's where burial sometimes becomes an issue. But two is I like them to start with what they have on site. I don't want them to go out and buy a special straw or wood chips or, well, we don't have corn stalks. That's okay. Use what you have. For the first couple times, let's try it. And then that's when producers that are really interested will start tweaking their recipe, whether that's for mortality composting or manure composting. And so I've had folks start with just the manure that they take out of their pens, and they'll put it in a row and compost it. And then 2 years later when I talk to them, they are letting the neighbors bring their yard waste over, and they're composting, beets from this and food waste from that, and they've started a whole operation. Yeah. So once they feel comfortable with the initial recipe, they can go from there.
It seems too that in your role, it's occurring to me that you're helping people to become comfortable with things that make us deeply uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
And
yes. Smells.
Smells, yeah. Defecation, death and defecation.
Yes, right.
And you are making us comfortable with these like really uncomfortable things that are part of a natural system, right? Yeah. And so one of the things that I wanted to get to is I interviewed Naeem Kawar up in Langdon at the Langdon Research Center, and that was a really wonderful visit, and he taught me so much about soil health.
Great teacher.
And one of the things that he said is, I can't really talk about soil health without talking about livestock and livestock integration. He says it's such a crucial part of a healthy soil. And so what role can dead and stinky things or livestock more broadly such as manure and mortality composting, how does that play into a broader soil health vision?
Yeah. So adding manure, and Naeem likes manure, and so this is even more fun to talk about because he'll say, like, we should be adding that stuff back, whether it's the actual animal or manure. He's a fan of it, and that's always fun when your soil health person is also a fan of manure. And we have a handful of agronomists as well in the state that also think adding manure to cropping systems is a positive. So when we add manure, we see an increase in water holding capacity. We see an increase in organic matter. We see an increase in what we call the good bugs. So we're adding some microbes back to the soil. And all those things are really good. Can we necessarily measure the dollar value put on like organic matter? Not really at this point. If we could, I would be able to answer a lot more questions for producers, but we do know that there's really good stuff besides the NPK that we're adding, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and the sulfur, and then the other micronutrients that we're adding as well. And so we know that it performs from a fertilizer standpoint, but we also know it performs from a soil health standpoint as well. And then just having the actual animal out there, so that's beneficial for the producer who owns the livestock, because they are getting, those animals are doing what they're supposed to do, right? They're grazing, they're using the resources that we have. It's beneficial for the crop producer because they are getting a little bit of, whether that's they let them come out and graze some residuals. And so we're getting the mix then from the hoof action. They're breaking up some of that residual and helping the microbes to digest it. That's a plus. A lot of them might not love the manure aspect of it yet, my crop producers, and we're getting there. But they can see other pluses besides just the stinky part of it. There are other pluses to adding livestock onto your land. So there are challenges that come with it, and we absolutely recognize those, as well as recognizing the challenges that come with using manure. For a crop producer, when I talk to them, when they reach into a fertilizer truck and pull out a handful of urea, it's urea every time. No questions asked. When they reach into a manure truck and pull out a handful of that, if they feel so inclined to do that, one time it might be corn stalks that was used for bedding. The next time they reach in, it might be manure. The next time they reach in, it might be some spilled feedstuffs and a little hair mixed in. Yeah. And so that's where the challenge comes in of using fresh manure on a cropping system, is the inconsistencies that we find with it. But Naeem would say that there's a benefit to that as well, to adding that still to the soil, still with its inconsistencies, which I really appreciate that. And then I tell my crop producers, if the inconsistencies make you not want to use the product but you're still interested in it, then let's try compost. Because in compost, we've mixed it all together and we've homogenized the product. Yeah. And then it's more consistent. Every time we reach in, it's compost.
Yeah. Well, in a case in point of that, I visited Steve Enger a few months back down in the Hatton area, and he was really gracious and took me on a tour of his operation, and I got to see his bin composting and his windrow composting. And when we were out looking at his windrow composting, he would take it bare hands, hand it to me even, and had me take a whiff, Yep. And what was once the dead and smelly things actually smelled like good. It's amazing. Like, there was an earthy kind of quality to it, and I don't know, it like smelled alive. I don't know how to say it any better than that. And one of the things that he did a lot of with me too is we'd go to every single one of his fields and he'd dig his hand into the soil and there it'd be full of worms. It'd be full of different kinds of, life, activity, And so to me that it is hard to quantify that in some ways, but the absence of it can make any kind of ag operation really challenging if you don't have that kind of life in the soil. So
Steve and Dorothy have been wonderful teachers to me in learning the process and how somebody who focuses more on crops and less on livestock still wants manure and wants to compost. I think that's just it's an excellent way to show crop producers that it's worth it. Yeah. It's worth adding to it. If somebody who is business minded but also soil health minded is willing to go through the work and the process of that, there has to be a benefit. Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that I would say with him, I mean, I felt like I went to a one-day master's class with him, and so it was kind of overwhelming, all the different things that he's getting into. But he clearly loves to learn. There's a curiosity there. There's a kind of willingness to fail, and those are hard things to come by for a lot of us. I mean, for me too. But in so many ways, that's what it takes, right? Is like that willingness to be curious, to try something, and not give up on it in the first go, and that kind of thing. So.
We often say, especially at a research extension center, we want to be the gold standard. We want to do things right. We want to be what producers look at and say, they did it, and so we can too. Let's try it. Let's talk to them and try it. But then we also have to be willing to take the hit if it doesn't work. And so we try a lot of things here that don't work. And we tell producers that, I want to try this. Well, let's talk about our experience here. And so it's nice that we can be the place that takes the hit like that.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial role in this broader landscape. I mean, none of us control the weather. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control. And so as much as we can have places like these research centers that commit themselves to learning and to trying and maybe doing the thing that seems a little out there or crazy and can see the benefits of it or to see that it maybe doesn't work or this tweak is necessary. That's really valuable. So it's my understanding that your job covers the entire state, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I've been bragging about covering all of Walsh County, which is 1,294 square miles. It's larger than the whole state of Rhode Island, but North Dakota is a monster state. That's a big state to cover. How would you describe the challenge of working across such a diverse landscape in terms of soil types And also different practices. I mean, out west is a very different place than here in the more eastern side where we get the Red River Valley and we get into the Prairie Pothole region,
Yes.
but it's a diverse state. So
Yeah.
how would you describe that challenge?
Challenge it is. And I think one of the main things for me when I go out is I have to say, where am I going today and what are the practices most common there? Because like you said, west versus central versus east, north versus south, it's a huge difference. And not just the weather-wise, because that makes a huge impact, topography, but also culture makes a huge difference too, in what folks are willing to try or not try. The main benefit for me, though, in my position as a specialist, I have extension agents in every county. And those extension agents, and so you said, like, I only have Walsh County, and our extension agents have their county. Now, we sometimes ask them to come out of their county and do some other things with us and be on state teams, and we really like to, if they're interested in something, we want them to come and do it with us. But for the most part, their county is their home, and they have roots there. And so sometimes, for me, it's a little hard because I'm like, I want roots somewhere, right? It's hard to have a whole state. I'm like, I want a home where, I know all the producers and all the things. But as a benefit to me in this position, they know that. And so before I go and do any producer visit, I call them first. My extension agents are always my first call. Hey, I'm going out to visit one of your producers today. Here's the issue. And most of the time, my extension agent has sent them to me, so they already know all the things. But sometimes the producers will just call me directly. And so then I let the extension agent know, hey, here's what's the deal. This is what I'm going to suggest. This is what I think we're going to see when we get there. One, I want you to come with me. And two, let's talk about if this is appropriate for your region or for your area or for these producers. And so working as a team, I would have not even half the success I do in this position if I didn't have my extension agents. No question.
Yeah, it does take a team, even
Yes.
when you're the specialist, to be able to have that network. I'm sure that's a huge benefit. So you spend some time working with youth in your role, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big part of what I like to do as well, is like growing the next generation of conservationists and farmers and ranchers. So I'm curious, how do you go about getting young people excited about manure and mortality,
Yeah.
waste composting, dead things, smelly things?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as hard as it seems. Maybe, yeah.
What's funny is if you say manure and you're like talking to kids about it, I get to do a lot of like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade stuff when I'm out and visiting with youth. And when you say manure and you're like, do you know what that is? And there's always at least one kid in the group that has it nailed. And he'll be like, poop? Like, it is poop. And then I got him. I got the whole rest of the group. They're like, poop! Ah! And from there, it just all goes downhill, right? I mean, and it's a really fun conversation.
That's what they say about poop.
Right? That's right. And so what's really fun is when I can have them at a demonstration site, whether that's here at a producer's place, at a soil conservation district demonstration. It's really fun for me to get to work with the 319 watershed coordinators in the state when they're doing youth stuff, because they almost always have some kind of demonstration or something that we can touch, feel, smell. And so if we have them at a demonstration, like we'll say a compost row, manure compost row, we'll have them glove up, and we'll have them reach in, just like you said Steve had you do, pull it out and smell it. And I typically will have them, if I have the opportunity, let's smell this one first, and like, oh, it smells so bad. And then we'll switch gears and we'll go to one that's, like you said, earthy and it just smells like soil should, right? You just want to put it there, you feel comfortable there, and they'll smell that. And they're always a little hesitant after the first one, and they'll be like, doesn't smell like anything. Okay, let's talk about that. Right? And so then we got them hooked. So first it's the word poop, and then it's the actual smell, and then it's the touch. How do they feel different? What does it feel like? Why does it feel different? How would this be different if you're going to put these in a pot and grow something? What's the difference going to be there? And then we can talk about nutrients and how do nutrients grow their bodies, and how do nutrients grow plants? Where do these nutrients come from? what made the nutrients. And so it's a slow progress toward what we want to get to. But yeah, poop is always the first way to grab them.
Yeah.
After that, students are awesome. They really want to pay attention. They want to answer the questions. And they know way more than I ever give them credit for.
Yeah. Well, and getting groups of students when they're curious, when they have that curiosity,
they want to be there,
and just enough willingness to get over the bad smell,
right? And even the ones in the back that are like, I'm not smelling anything. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then all the other students will smell it, and they're like, fine, I'll smell it too.
Right? Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And then bringing them to where, like, how soil is made. I mean, that's a really kind of powerful image for them to be able to come away with. That it's a process, and that we and it takes some of these things that we don't like to think about to make it. You know. Speaking of that, and this is, forgive me, the writer in me just sometimes sees poetic things everywhere, but to me there is something truly poetic about how your work teaches us how dead things become part of a living soil. And so I'm wondering what the most enduring lesson you have learned from your work in manure management and mortality composting.
I don't know. This answer will not be so poetic. Sure. And I don't even know if this is what you're hoping that I'll say. Sure. But I think the most enduring thing I've learned is relationships matter. In the 11 years. Had you asked me in year 2, probably would have said something different. Maybe even in year 9, I would have said something different. But having gone through the last couple of years of drought, so first too much water, and then not enough water, and then terrible winters for a couple years, and then disease situations like highly pathogenic avian influenza, where I've had to help those producers. And so we've had so many different scenarios of going out and working with producers in terrible situations. Helps me realize that relationships is what it comes down to, whether that's my network of professional colleagues that I can call and say, here's what we're dealing with, I'm not sure what to do with this. And when I say professional colleagues, I'm talking about our extension agents, other specialists, our researchers that have done the thing, our soil conservation district folks, the NRCS people I get to work with, our 319 watershed coordinators, the Department of Agriculture, our Department of Environmental Quality. They're all part of my network. But then I get to go out of state too. And so we have a national group too that works on manure and mortality. And I can call them and say, we haven't dealt with this here at all, but we are having a really hard time. We need help. And they're just like me. They get to help one producer at a time. And so if they've done it, they're more than happy to share. So I think the lesson is your network is so darn important. It's so important, and valuing the people within that. And then realizing, sometimes you don't realize until that person moves on to something else. And you're like, oh, that was such an important part of this network. Yeah. So I think it's the people.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very poetic answer, actually. We're on Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast, and we call it that both for the linguistic reason that finding common ground across difference is a really important thing. But the prairie and the region that we occupy is a literal common ground across generations. I mean, in so many ways, I think of soil as an heirloom that connects me to my grandparents and great-grandparents, and generations even before that, indigenous people. I mean, soil is an heirloom. It's something that we pass on to the future. We inherit from the past and pass on to the future. And thinking about mortality composting and manure management actually really helps to, solidify that.
Right? Yes.
Make that like a literal thing, right? And so there's that kind of relationship. There's a relationship for me, it's multi-species. We have all these other species in the soil. We have microbes and other kinds of things that we kind of categorize as bugs. But if I could have been anything else before I became what I am today, I probably would have been an entomologist. I didn't know what that was, but I love bugs and I love thinking about them, and they're so amazing. I mean, it's like an alien planet when you get down to that level, right? It's so incredible. And so relationships and being able to expand that view, the professional network that you mentioned is so crucial. But I have like almost 50 first cousins back where the region that I come from, it's full of that. And, when I did my graduate work, I studied the Dakota tribal language, so my PhD is actually in Native American and Indigenous literature, and there's a word that I liked a lot in Dakota Lakota tribal language, and it's mitakuye owasin, and it means all my relations, and it's a way of recognizing relationship to family and clan, but also relationship that crosses species boundaries and recognizes relationship to place. And there's something about the work you're doing with livestock and with animals and bringing that to young people and to producers that feels like it is all relational. So I think it's poetic. I'll stick to that. So I imagine that there continues to be a lot to learn in this role, even after 11 years in the field and your schooling before that. So I'm wondering, are you still learning exciting things in your work? And how has the learning process or the questions you're interested in changed since you first started?
So for like one day, a couple years ago, I thought, maybe I'm bored. What else? What else is there? And then highly pathogenic avian influenza hit our poultry producers in the state, both backyard and commercial, and I'm not bored. I learned so much, more than I ever thought I would want to learn in 2 years. And relying on the past things that I've learned to pull them into the current, but then also realizing there's a whole other world of things I have not ever had to do, know, or any reason to understand them. Here we are, now I do, which has led to new networks and new relationships, both with producers and professionally. So how have the questions changed, and is there anything still exciting? Yeah, I really like my job, and I like my career, and I like all the things about this system, whether that's extension, or dead animals, or manure, or if all of it is just a way to get to relationship. And so my answer to this is the whole system. I like the whole system approach. When I first started, right, the questions were like, how do you sample manure? Or why would I sample manure? Or an animal died, why would I compost it? And I still get those questions, and I still like the questions like that. But I also like when producers like Steve Enger call me and challenge me on something. When they'll ask a question, and my first reaction when I'm running around and feel like a hamster on a wheel is, why would I have ever thought about that? And then the next part is, now I get to think about that. And then it's really fun because the more I start to dig into those things and answer those questions, and I have other compost producers who will call, and they only call me once or twice a year, and they never expect an answer. They just wanted to mull something over with me. I have a handful of producers that'll do that, and I say they do that for me. It's not annoying to me. It's not frustrating. It gives me the opportunity to stop the current madness of just the day-to-day questions, what we're doing, and did I make the coffee right today, and do I have the name tags correct, and step outside and remember why. Why are we doing this? What is the whole system approach? It gets me back into the actual part of, this is why we do this job. This is why it matters. It's not just manure, it's not just dead animals, it's somebody's livelihood. And it's protecting the soils that we have ties to in the past and hopefully ties to in the future. And so I like those kinds of whole system questions that I didn't start getting or truly appreciate until probably 8 years into what I'm doing. And so I think it's the whole system approach.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I really like the way that you described getting a question from someone like Steve Anger and how that changed. You're like, why would have I ever thought of that?
Yeah.
And then now I get to think of that, and it changes the whole direction and
Yep.
approach. And as someone who really loves language, I think we're in many ways, we're in a world that's driven by trying to find the answers. We need the answers,
Yep.
and we want to figure out how to get things done. But in so many ways, I find my role, both in my time as a teacher and even today, of trying to collaboratively come up with better questions. And one of the reasons I say that, I like that the word question at its root has the word quest. And it tells us that the questions we're asking determine the journey we're on.
Right.
And what we're questing for.
Yep.
And on my own, I can't come up with as good of questions if I'm not doing it in a collaboration in that relational way.
Yep.
And so good questions are a gift, really.
Yeah.
When
Yes.
someone asks us a good question and we don't have the answer,
Yes.
to me that's the only kind of real question. A real question is one that I do not have the answer for. I have the humility to know I don't know the answer.
Yep.
And I want to pursue it. I want
Yeah.
to follow a path and try to learn on that path. And some of our best questions, we don't find the answer to the original question,
Yep.
but we find lots of interesting things along the pursuit. So
We have a retired animal scientist who's now an emeritus here at the Research Extension Center, Dr. Vern Anderson. And so early in my career, he would email me just the most crazy question, what I would consider just the most random question. And I would just be like, I am trying to figure out all these other things and how to save my job, keep my job, and do my job, and whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know what this means. So I would go down to his office and be like, what are you looking for, Vern? And he'd be like, whatever you can find. And I would just be like, I don't even know what that means. And I would go back to my office and I'd leave it in my email for a while and I would search around looking for a concrete answer and I'd email him something and he'd be like, and I would take time, right? Send this elaborate thing back and he would say, thanks. And I'd be like, thanks? Like, this just took me how long? It took me until he retired to realize what he was doing for me. He was just making me think about why does the stuff we're doing actually matter? Stop running like a hamster on the wheel, get outside the box a second, and look at the whole picture.
yeah,
And so once he retired and those kinds of questions stopped, and then my producers started calling and asking those kinds of questions, I was like, oh, okay. This is one of those, we're not looking for an answer, we're looking to search along the way. Yeah, it was really cool.
That's really, thank you for that story. That's really incredible.
Thank you for listening to Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. We'd like to thank Mary Keena for taking the time to school us on manure and mortality composting. Special thanks to Crista Fiala for producing today's episode and to Matthew Connolly for the theme music. Thanks also to the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust for providing grant funds to support the production of the podcast. Until next time, this is your host, Josh Anderson, signing off for Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast, is supported by a generous grant from the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust. If you would like to contribute to our on-the-ground conservation initiatives, and our conservation internship and mentorship programs here in North Dakota, please consider making a donation to us through our member support link on our Spotify page. Your contributions will directly support the Walsh County Three Rivers Soil Conservation District, where this year we will plant over 10,000 trees and several hundred acres of conservation grass, pollinators, and cover crops, while also offering hands-on conservation job training to our high school and college interns. You can also support our efforts by liking, reviewing, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thank you.